friend. The mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Two Whopper Juniors and 4 Coca-Cola. And would I have to wait long if you made one Whopper with no pickle and no lettuce?
No, sir. Hold the pickle, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us serve it your way.
Oh, well, in that case, could I have the other Whopper with extra ketchup?
Sure. We can serve your rolled beef Whopper fresh with everything on top, or any way you think is proper. Have it your way.
Now that's the way to do things. Our way.
Have it your way. Have it your way at Burger King. At Burger King.
We must return to tradition.
We must indeed.
Isn't that great?
You know,
I bet a lot of our older listeners remember that commercial.
Do we have older listeners?
Oh, we have a lot of boomers. Yes, a lot of people in their 80s and 90s listen to the show.
Hey guys.
Yeah, a lot of people in the nursing homes. We're big in the nursing homes. We single-handedly saved a lot of nursing homes from accepting COVID patients, even though it isn't real, because we were warning them early on about it.
Yeah, well, not to pat ourselves on the back, but yeah, we did.
Well, I mean, I think a little bit of back patting is deserved. We did save roughly 2.8 million lives.
Yeah.
Over the past year.
Yeah.
And have gotten very little credit for it.
I'm not saying we're heroes, but, you know.
Well, we're at least not mass murderers. Like, yeah. Like some mayors and governors of states.
Right. True.
But that's another story. A lot of people that would be vulnerable to COVID also are listeners and also remember that Burger King commercial. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, special orders don't upset. Can you imagine someone having that attitude today?
Oh man, I was just thinking that sort of service is not, I mean, eat with or without singing. Just that attitude. That would be so awesome to go into a restaurant. I was just complaining yesterday to one of our listeners that now you go to Chick-fil-A and you get waited on in the drive-thru by transgendered Napoleon Dynamite.
Really? I haven't noticed that. I don't go to Chick-fil-A really ever.
Yeah.
But I haven't noticed that in a long time. Although their fast food efficiency is remarkable.
Well, they're still lines. Efficient, but now they're also efficient at fast food apostasy.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Chick-fil-A's charter is to hold the deposit of the faith and to make sure that they keep the teachings of the apostles alive. Right. And people that trust in them to do that are not misguided at all. True. Because they're not. But you know what I'm saying.
I'm really just complaining about their woke staffing choices.
Oh, I know. Well, I think the problem is now, if you're a big company, your pool of people that in their 20s and teens that would work your fast food jobs are like 60% woke people.
Well, yes, I suppose that's true.
So you're like, well, who do I pull from? You know,
maybe a little sympathy is in order.
Yeah, like I was at the gas station the other day, and this because unfortunately I had to make another trip to Florida, which is Florida. It's every meme about Florida man is true, and has been true for all time. They're both an admirable people and also a garbage people at the same time.
Yeah.
Every person in Florida is nice and has a suntan, but is also on meth, has a tattoo of someone named Julia, and a pair of brass knuckles in their pocket. And they're all, it's wherever you go, there's always some guy walking on the side of the road shirtless, no matter if it's the major highway or a small road out in the swamp.
Yep.
Always a shirtless guy walking. And I was there, and I saw a young woke Floridian who had blue hair, very skinny. Mm-hmm. He was wearing pink nails. And I don't even know. He didn't even seem like he was on the spectrum of the letters. The LGBT ABCD letters.
I think even that is breaking down now.
Yeah, I think he just wanted to wear it because he was bored.
Yeah.
But anyway, he had the blue hair and he had the fingernails and he had lipstick. But he still had a tattoo of somebody named Lucy barely visible on his collarbone under his shirt.
Interesting.
And I'm sure he was still on meth and had brass knuckles. I'm sure all those things were still true about him.
Yeah.
And so what am I going to do? Am I going to get mad at, I think this was a Flying J? Yeah, I did, of course. But was it fruitful? Probably not.
No.
You know, Flying J, I've mentioned this before, that Flying J is your best on-road shower situation.
I'm a loves man myself.
That's the big divide. That's the divide of our age. You know, like when our parents were growing up, it was Ford or Chevy. Mm-hmm. And then when we were growing up, it was Nintendo or Sega.
Yeah.
And now among the kids, the youth, it is Flying J or Loves.
Yeah.
And I've always been a Flying J person, although Loves, I could see the appeal of Loves. Mm-hmm. They always have those thinly disguised weapons in Loves. You notice that? Oh,
yeah, like to check your tire pressure or whatever.
Yeah, it's like check your tire pressure, and it's just a bat with a spike on the end of it or something.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, here, check your, this is for all the, I guess truck drivers feel the need to have clubs a lot. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
But my favorite part about that was a commercial from 1974 for Burger King. My favorite part about it is then they also felt the need to make a black version.
Oh, yes.
So let's play that one real quick. This came out the same year, a little after.
Okay, coming at you.
May I help you, sir?
If I wanted a Whopper and I asked you to hold the pickles and hold the lettuce, I know I'd get that fast. But would I get to hear you sing?
No, sir.
No?
You'd get to hear us sing. Girls? Ooh, hold the pickle, hold the lettuce, special order, donuts, bread, and all we ask is that you let us serve it your way.
All right.
Yeah, we can fill your broad beef Whopper fresh with everything on top, or any way you think it's proper, have it your way.
Hey, you got one big hit on your hands.
Well, the Whopper's one big hamburger.
All right.
All right.
I want that. Can we clip that, him saying that, and just use that as a stock sound?
Yes, we can.
All right.
We sure can.
He walks in. It's basically the same commercial, but they've made everyone black.
Yep.
And the guy walks in, and he's wearing a great 70s disco jacket,
like leisure suit sort of thing.
Yeah, he looks fantastic. And he walks in and he says, I know I'd get that fast. But you can tell advertising is sort of primitive still. Mm-hmm. He's like, if I ask for that, I know I get it fast. But I get it, and when he says, "When I get to hear you sing," and she says no, he says this look of like racial discrimination. Like, you're not, the white lady would sing,
Yeah.
but they're not gonna make the black. But then she goes, "You could hear us sing," and she snaps her fingers, and the other two black women that are working at the counter spin around and raise their hands up and start singing. He's like, "All right, now no, it's not discrimination. It's even better." And there's one old white couple like in the booth just jamming.
Yeah. I'd be jamming. That was great. I'd listen to that for fun. I mean, that was great.
It was great. But I like those things don't have anything to do with what we're talking about today. Except that I guess it highlights the continual fact that America simply cannot stop having a weird relationship with black people.
It's true.
Like, they just can't act normal, right? Like, they have to do big show. Like, well, we had the commercial, yes, but do we need a jive one? And everyone was sitting around Burger King going, yeah, we probably need a jive one. We probably need one that's like soul with black people. Otherwise, they won't buy hamburgers. Yeah, and that's like, and they still do that. Are you familiar with 365black.com?
No, what is that?
Well, it was recently in the parade of wokeness over the past couple of years removed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to the numbers 365 and then the word black.com, as like you're black all year round, it would go. It still reroutes you to McDonald's, but it would go until like 2017, I think it would take you to a special black person McDonald's website.
Really?
Yeah, 365 black. It didn't have McDonald's in the title, but it would go it was basically the same website as the regular McDonald's website, but all the pictures were replaced with pictures of black people, and there was a lot more emphasis on hip hop and hamburgers.
What?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a thing. It was very curious, but they felt the need to be like, yeah, well, obviously black people won't purchase hamburgers if we just have pictures of hamburgers and nice prices. There has to be hip hop involved, or otherwise the black youth are not going to come to the store. And this was a website that existed for like 10 years. Because I first remember being familiar with it a while ago. And then I would check back in on it every now and then to just admire it and all of its dumpster fireness. But they had people that were like staffed with a separate McDonald's black website, which I thought was great.
I'm just kind of floored by this because this means that corporate executive suite types think that like young regular people just cruise fast food corporate websites for kicks.
Right, as though anyone was going to this website ever.
Except to laugh at it, yeah.
Or that it had any bearing on whether or not you would buy a hamburger. Like, does anyone go to McDonald's regular website?
I can just imagine like the marketing meeting where they bring in the graph of the traffic to 365black.com and they're like, man, traffic's up. This website is a huge hit, and everybody's just visiting it to gawk and laugh.
Yeah, which I imagine is what. And then at some point in the wokeness, they thought, someone pointed out that maybe having a separate, although segregation's coming back into style on a lot of campuses, so it may come back around.
Yeah,
and we'll have Mickey Hip Hops or whatever. Put it up there. It'll be Ronald McDonald, but with a lot more chains.
Yeah.
And he'll be he'll have a commercial where he'll take makeup remover, remove his makeup, and he found out he's been black all along.
It's just so incredibly patronizing. I can't.
Well, we still do this. America still can't. I mean, right now they feel a lot of journalists, and feel the need to literally pretend a comic book land in Africa called Wakanda is real.
It's like the business equivalent of me having a black family over to my house for dinner and trying to like wear Zulu clothing and serve like,
which
weird.
our Congress did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You remember that? They put on that kente cloth.
Yeah, man.
And did it. It's like, what are you doing, you weirdos?
I'm making you feel welcome, strange people. Look, I also appreciate your things.
It's like, and today it's Kwanzaa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people,
yeah.
I've never met a single black person in my life that celebrated Kwanzaa.
Neither have I.
Because it's a made up, not real thing. They mostly celebrate Christmas.
I think white people only celebrate Kwanzaa.
Exactly. I don't understand. But see, white people in this country do not know how to interact with black people. And I don't know why they can't just be normal.
Yeah, man.
They have
just
to do all
normal.
of these wild things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have to get on there and say, actually, black women built the space shuttle.
Right.
And everyone goes, what? It's like, yeah, there's the Hidden Figures.
It's so awkward when people are like trying to pretend they believe that.
Yeah, because they know they don't. The real Hidden Figures were the Nazis, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's Operation Paperclip.
Yep, it is.
Werner von Braun.
True.
They hid them away, and they didn't really talk about their contributions very much. But without the Nazis and their V-2 rockets, there would be no NASA.
Mm-hmm.
They're the real Hidden Figures. We need to make another movie. And it'll still have black women in it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're goose-stepping down the hallway, and they're in full Nazi regalia.
Now, I would buy a ticket to that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, recast Werner von Braun as a black woman.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Who hates the Jews, naturally. Which isn't that big of a step for some black people.
I hope Harvey Weinstein's listening to this. He could produce this movie.
Right. Because she will be a black Hebrew Israelite also, who claims that she's the actual Jew.
Yeah, right.
And that the Jewish people are imposters.
It's all coming together.
This is going to be a great movie. But yeah, people America, I don't know what is wrong with white people in America. I mean, the thing is, people feel uncomfortable around people who are dissimilar to them.
Well, a little sympathy is due because, especially in public school, young children are subjected to psychological abuse around racism and history and all this stuff, to the point where if you have budding friendships between young people of different races, it's swiftly destroyed by the public school curriculum and indoctrination that they're subjected to.
Yeah, but I don't understand why kids my default position going to school was like, yeah, whatever. Like that's what you're supposed to do as a cool kid. Is you're supposed to ignore what your teachers are saying.
No, they don't do that anymore. And I know. And even I think most kids from our generation a lot of them were not able to do that because it's not like the teacher was telling you about the importance of a budget. It was talking about, it was about like guilt and injustice and all the hand wringing and all the really important, it's like you only get to make one point to the kids, right? They're not going to listen to you every time. So save your ammo. And they saved it for this. And they just successive generations that could have just been normal with each other are turned into this awkward nonsense by entirely artificial means at this point.
Yeah, I guess so. I never listened to any, even when they were trying to guilt me on stuff. I had enough. Yeah. I was always a child worried about eternal hellfire.
That's as you should be.
More than race relations. And so I was too busy worried about, committing the sin of Enoch or whatever.
Everybody's the same color in hell,
Right, which is fire color.
Red and crispy.
Red and crispy. And so, yeah, but oh man, America just cannot be normal with and a lot of it is of course in-group preference disguised as out-group altruism.
Yeah.
Like stop Asian hate, but
Right.
also don't let them into Ivy League schools.
Right. Yeah.
And also, China's our mortal enemy who's actually committing a genocide against Muslims, who, by the way, we also like to kill. But stop Asian hate.
Right.
They're literally committing genocide against the Muslims. Stop Asian hate. Don't let them in Ivy League schools. Stop Asian hate.
Yeah.
See, that's the gives the game away.
Yeah.
Because like rightly or wrongly, and I think Prog Rock Farmer made a good point that it's rightly. Because American blacks chose MLK over Malcolm X, which was the wrong choice. But I digress. But the sort of waspy class that goes to Ivy League schools, which then funnels them into high-paying careers and positions of status and political parties, doesn't view African Americans as a threat to their power. Because in choosing MLK over Malcolm X, they chose integration into the existing system rather than self-rule.
Right.
But it does think that Asians could become a threat. So they actively discriminate against Asians, letting them into their colleges. And they're engaged in in-group preference of like their New Englandy waspy class while screaming stop Asian hate. See? And then they let in the black people who they don't view as a threat in order to say, well, we don't have any room for Asians because we have to let in these other people.
It's also messed up on just so many levels.
It's very messed up. It's very bad. It's very cynical. It's very evil. I mean, as Prog Rock Farmer says, black people in America really do not have any power. They're just used as a buffer zone between the wealthy and the poor to exclude others from their ranks who might challenge them. Like, oh, you poor people. Like, you notice how it's always like Midwesterners and it's these people that don't really have enough money but are always like could be middle class enough to maybe start getting power. Like, oh, you guys are, and they just keep throwing racism at them, and they use these blacks as a buffer zone. It's all it is. Yeah, you know. And but really, yeah, Malcolm X was the way to go. Black people. He was a smarter man, less of an adulterer and plagiarizer. Yeah. And he was actually arguing for black autonomy and like self-rule, right? Which was the way to go, in my opinion. But, you know, they didn't ask me at the time because I wasn't born yet. Right. But hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. We, you know, with his truth is marching on. Those two things are the same song. Yeah. How great are those outfits they're wearing also? Like the big poofy red and yellow hats?
Oh, they're fantastic. I'll put links in the show notes.
At some point, fast food workers just stopped trying. Yeah. They just stopped. They were like, I mean, they used to look great. Oh, I got tea. So anyway, we have some news today to talk about before we get into our main things.
We do?
We do have some news to talk about today. Well, you know, like the boat issue.
Oh, yeah, that whole thing. And
the thing that fell from the sky. Oh, but before we do mailbag, we got a mailbag. You sent me a mailbag. Who was it from? What was the name of this person? Let me see. I'll read it first, and then I'll tell you who sent it. It was here was the letter. It said, "I find it remarkable how closely reality today is mirroring the fictional Warhammer 40K universe. The scientific method is for heretics. Quote, research, unquote, is replaced with rote cult rituals where the practitioners don't understand what they're doing. Can you and Sumo have a discussion about the bizarre emerging cult of science?" And that was from someone who called themselves Adeptus Mechanus Fabricator General.
I love it that we have a Fabricator General now.
Me too.
That's a great title.
This person is the captain of our propaganda arm.
Sweet. Congratulations.
General. Yeah, the cult of science. Well, I mean, we're in a cargo cult. We live in a cargo cult. I wish I was more familiar with Warhammer 40K so I could speak on that aspect of it.
As I also am.
Are you?
No,
I think
I'm not very familiar.
I think for some reason a lot of our listeners are. I've gotten multiple Warhammer 40K references, but I was a nerdy enough kid as it was, right?
Yeah.
And I always felt like, though I felt the call of having little miniatures to paint, I never took the step because I cognized that would be one bridge too far.
I see.
Just like this is why I never got into Pokemons. Because, I mean, the idea of autistically collecting weird things that were made up has always been fun.
Yeah.
That's why people... It's like baseball cards, but you could make up whatever you wanted. The original NFT, if you will. And it was that... I could always see why people were into that. And then there were like different Game Boy games. There was like blue and red and yellow or something. And you could put them... Your Game Boy would remember your status from one game or your Pokemons, and they'd have them in another game, and so it was this big complicated system. And creating a big made up complicated system that one has to navigate always appeals to a certain part of the male brain.
Oh yeah.
But I for the same reasons that I didn't go down the Pokemon's road, I didn't go down the Warhammer 40K road or the Dungeons and Dragons road. Yeah. Because it was just too... I felt like if you go across the Dungeons and Dragons road, it would... So growing up, there was across the road from where I went to school, there was a little field. And occasionally when I was in like middle school, I would see people out there in LARPing clothes. Yeah. Dressed as like a knight or like a wizard. And I just have this memory of like someone being out there going, fireball! And like throwing like a red painted styrofoam ball at somebody. And I remember thinking, all you have to do is avoid being that. And you will get through school. Mm-hmm. So I never could do, because I was always afraid of anything that might lead to that. Yep. And I feel like Warhammer, I'm not saying that our listeners that were Warhammer 40K people, or still are that. Some of them probably are. But that's why I'm not familiar with it. But yeah, it is. It's a cargo cult.
Warhammer 40K is a cargo cult?
No, our society is a cargo cult.
Yes.
When he talks about cult of science, and we've replaced research with rote cult rituals. Yes. People don't understand what we're doing. Mm-hmm. This happens when people begin to mistake the outward forms of things for the things those forms represent. Indeed. For example, people have come to think of the institutions where science has traditionally been done as being synonymous with science. In other words, in the public's head, Harvard is science. The CDC is science. Right? Science as a method or a tool is lost or completely irrelevant because we're just worshiping Coca-Cola bottles and photos of Prince Charles. We're just worshiping the outward forms of the things. Yeah. All the accoutrements around the things that gave us the science and the technology have become a symbolic replacement for the thing itself. Mm-hmm. It's like the same thing that is happening in government too. Like the court is democracy. The numbers displayed on the screen is the vote. Right? Right. You see this the way people talk about freedom of the press, like as though the press, quote unquote, was ever meant to refer to like CNBC. Yeah. It literally means the freedom of the printing press. Mm-hmm. Like not capital P press with like an institution, like the press, like the thing that presses. Yep. And the idea was that no one could censor what could be put on the printed page, what could be pressed. But in cargo cult world, that gets twisted round to mean that if you ever make fun of a mainstream journalist, you're violating the First Amendment. Because they're like, well, this person looks like a representative of the people that used to run a press. Therefore, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
In the absence of a rigorous state religion, humans will turn anything into a religion.
Correct.
That's how that switch happens between the substance and the form.
Yeah. I mean, a cargo cult in its most basic form is a primitive society performing rituals and rites they believe will cause a more sophisticated technologically society to deliver material goods to them.
Yeah.
Like maybe technology, maybe better blankets or penicillin, maybe Coca-Cola, sodium Walkmans or something. Right? Hold on, I have a cat problem.
Oh, this is terrible.
Give me 5 seconds. Here we go. I'm going to get rid of this thing.
Have it your way. Burger King.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, that was the listener's fault. What is it? Oh yeah, cargo cult, right?
Yeah.
They are. It's a primitive society performing rituals to get stuff from a more technologically advanced society. Like, you're familiar with with John Frum?
No.
Not John Frum? Our listener? So we are the people of Vanuatu Island.
Yes.
And we are ritualistically blessing our hands with holy hand sanitizer and performing the sacred cleaning of the chairs with wipe down cloths in order to receive the blessings of John Frum. I love John Frum. John Frum, I think this is likewise. I think I like John Frum because I suspect that it may be our destiny also.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometime in the coming decades, the cave-dwelling Walmart tribe of Idaho will be burning incense to the god smokestack, hoping to receive blessings to their herb garden.
Yeah, man.
That's what I think will probably. I think that's probably where our trajectory is headed. The Walmart tribe of Idaho. But yeah, the religion of John Frum was this religion that started on the island of Tanna in Vanuatu. And there are lots of theories about where the religion started. But a lot of people believe it was centered around the worship of an actual American named John. And then it became John Frum, F-R-U-M, as a corruption of John from America.
Oh, funny.
Right. Isn't that ridiculous? It was John from America, and people just like, who gave us these things? Oh, John from America. John gave us these Coca-Cola bottles? Yeah, John from America. And they start saying John from.
Mm-hmm.
And they got what happened was during the war, American troops were stationed on the island. And they had a near endless supply of nice goods that they would share. They had clothes, they had food, they had radios, they had soda, they had nice blankets. They could build houses and stuff that wouldn't fall down in a hurricane. And then they left after the war. And this was all the people on the island could do was hope that they would come back and bring all their nice stuff with them. So they started literally building landing strips and like praying over them.
Oh no.
Hoping that doing this would cause the planes to come back and bring them cargo. And they would actually stand out there with painted sticks as if they were guiding in non-existent planes. And they would just hope that, like, they were like, well, look, this is what the people that were here, this is what the Americans did to make the plane come. Maybe if we do it, the plane will come. See, that was the thinking. And it's not irrational, totally. It's like, well, yeah, we'll just copy what they did. And that's what we are looking back on, like, oh, America used to be prosperous. America used to be strong. What if we just ape the things that Americans back then did? Like, they liked science.
Yeah.
We effing love science. They liked to march around in the street and talk about black people.
Yeah.
We will march around in the street and talk about black people. They like to talk, they like to have immigrants. If we just do the things they did, and it doesn't, and then we're just painting sticks on non-existent runways and waving them around in the sky, hoping that, the John Frum religion got really crazy. It still exists. Mm-hmm. Like in the 50s, there was this one guy named Nakomaha, and he created the Tana Army, which still exists, which isn't really an army. It's more of a ritualistic society that does organized military parades, because the men on the island would march in drills. And they said, well, if we march in the drills, John Frum will return and give us the blessings. Like, if we just create the same thing here, the planes will come back.
Has anybody just loaded up a plane with stuff and landed on the airstrip that they built for,
There's been some people that have tried to humor them, yes, which hasn't been good for them because it just justifies their... I guess it worked in that sense, right? If you do it long enough, people are like, what are they doing? I guess we'll bring some cargo because they're really... So maybe, it's not... But yeah, nonviolent military parades is something I also expect from our listeners in the future.
Get to it, guys. A lot of tassels.
And so these parades, they would wear white T-shirts that said TA USA on them. They write in English letters. It stood for Tana Army USA.
Wow.
And they still do this parade every year on February 15th, which is John Frum Day, which is the day of the year on which the followers believe John Frum will return and bring them the blessings from above, from the sky, with his airplane. There was this whole documentary about it called Waiting for John, which was great, by David Attenborough. They even have their own political party on the island now, the John Frum Society.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. There's another on the same island that instead of worshiping John Frum, worships Prince Philip instead.
Interesting.
Yeah, like their actual Prince Philip, like they have like when he learned about this, he actually went to the island and tried to talk to them about it. It was okay. They still believe he's the divine being. I think in their cosmology, Prince Philip is like a brother of John Frum or something.
Okay.
I don't know, because I think they got the idea that like America comes from England or something, and so they're like, oh, English, and then the Prince Philip is like the god of England or whatever. So in their heads, Prince Philip and John Frum are brothers. And they have like little shrines set up to Prince Philip and stuff. And but yeah, so it's cargo cult mentality. Max Kaiser said the same thing the other day. Because the like I said, the cargo cult is just mimicking like the dress styles and the day-to-day activities of people who were prosperous in hopes that you will also make that happen. And what is SJWism but a re-LARPing of the 1960s when we used to be prosperous? Yeah. Back when people had stuff, they used to march and talk about black people a lot. If we do that, ergo, boo, 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 dot, dot, dot. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3, question mark, step 4, profit. Yeah. And it's all just runways to nowhere with colored sticks. Of course, Max Kaiser is a money guy, and he was comparing this to, this year is the 50th anniversary of the U.S. dollar. What? Yeah, it's that. Well, in his language. Okay. Because it is the 50th anniversary of when the U.S. dollar was taken off the gold standard, and so he's always claimed that it makes it a different currency, which is sort of true.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so he's like, and it hasn't gone. He says it hasn't gone well, has it? Taking it off the because like a lot of people, like inflation didn't really happen, but it's just an enormous. I mean, one, it did obviously, because back when you could have it your way at Burger King Whoppers were like 10 cents.
Yep.
So that's a big, and then also like the stagnating wages are a form of inflation. The inflation is dispersed over the whole. There's a great website called What Happened. It's WTF Happened in 1971. Are you familiar? And it's just graph after graph after graph of like wages versus GDP, and then like life expectancy and household income, number of people, and it's all nice linear graphs until 1971. They get off the gold standard, and then they just start diverging wildly.
Yeah,
and the diverging goes more and more in each direction, which is probably the root of a lot of our problems at the moment. Now, I mean, it's people don't like it when you can reduce something that is such profound spiritual problems to like something as bland as money.
Well, it's not as bland as money because it's a program of pillaging.
Correct.
It's a pillaging of the middle class of America. So
Correct.
all that wealth that came out of the post-war years and went to the middle class is now being harvested by the elites.
Yeah, and it fuels a lot of these behaviors, like so traditional American Protestant values, like work hard and save and like be prudent, it stops working when there's no more incentive to save money because the value of money is continually devalued.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Right, and so like then in that environment, the only reasonable option is hedonism, because if you don't spend it now, it will be worth less in the future. So it fuels this consumerism. It fuels this, and then people cannot save money and like try to get ahead. So people are terrified of like losing their job and their health insurance, and they don't want to stand up to wokeism. It's all this big. It's like the little domino meme. You know, you push the little domino and the big domino falls.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same thing.
If we were able to secure our own futures in retirement through our own hard work and independence, we wouldn't be beholden to wokeness, or we wouldn't fear, being canceled or whatever, because we would have the economic power to get what we needed by our own work. But
right.
that's been to a large degree taken away.
Right. Thank you, Nixon. But it's psychological too. I mean, it goes back to the people on the island and their cargo cult, because they had. I think this is the same psychology that's in all humans everywhere. But they had on this island, they had what they called the culture of the big man and the rubbish man.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of primitive societies are centered around gift giving and mutual exchange.
Yep.
And the person that could give the most gifts to people was called the big man, because he had the most resources. But you were always expected to repay gifts that you were given in some other fashion. And if you couldn't, you were deemed a rubbish man, right? Which is like he can't basically pay his debts.
Right.
It's the same psyche. Like people listen to the so-called elites because with their fake money, they can be the big men handing down the gifts from the gods. Like they have all the resources, right?
Right.
And then the society has branched into two groups. One group is people that have convinced themselves that they deserve, and I'm not claiming which one is right here, but they convince themselves that they deserve the gifts from the big men in the forms of entitlements and welfare. And the other people are people who remember that they used to be big men themselves back in the day. Like this is the cultures that still, like, the Rust Belt and stuff. They remember a time when they used to have factory work and good jobs.
Yep.
But now they're rubbish men, and they resent that.
Yeah.
And they don't want the entitlements because in their minds, that makes them rubbish men. And that's why people are always like, why don't you just accept more welfare? And they're like, but we don't want welfare. Because in their minds, like, they're still operating in that frame. And so you've got this big man, rubbish man, and that's why the cargo cult took off, because like imagine you're the society that has that social system, and then people land from the sky with basically boxes and boxes of infinite amounts of goods. They become the biggest of the big men.
Yep.
Right? Because they just and then the cargo cult, the people on the island, all felt like rubbish men by comparison, and they just began to worship them. I mean, it's just sort of, and that's really, that's the religion of most everybody on the planet, is the worship of whomever or whatever they think will give them the most stuff. People pretend they're not after that. They're like, I'm after heaven, they say. But then their descriptions of heaven are just like filled with gold and silver talk. Right? It's just like, I get the biggest of the stuff just later. And that's, there are people that like, Alan Watts used to talk about that. He would say, nothing's changed since we were children wanting candy bars. He said we were kids and we wanted a candy bar, and we got the candy bar and we found out we're still not satisfied in our soul. So we move on to progressively higher things. Like we said, okay, was it candy bars? Maybe satisfaction is found in getting the highest score in a video game. And then you do that. And you're like, okay, it's not there. Maybe it's being the football star. Okay, it's not there. Maybe it's getting the best grades and going to the best college. Or maybe it's in getting the best career, making the best money. No, okay. Maybe the real goodie is in a material goodie. Maybe it's like a highbrow thing that's found in art and literature and music. And then you get good at that and you're like, no. I say, I see, it's a spiritual goodie. But you're still just after the same thing you were after when you wanted candy bars. And there's a lot of truth to that, which is the Buddhist critique of people in general. And they say, well, that's where their idea of abandoning all desire comes from, because they say, well, you're just always searching for desire. But then you're in a loop of like, well, now I'm desiring not to desire.
Yeah, that didn't work either.
So, which of course the Buddha recognized, and he would say, try not to desire too much. That's what they called the middle way. Because like if you try, then you're still desiring. And so just shoot for, and then it was basically this path of apathy. You know. But yeah, so you're always in that sort of loop. I mean, even early Christianity had this. I mean, the narrative for many converts was, although it appears that you're a rubbish man, you're actually going to be regarded in the afterlife and given everything. Hence, you are a big man. Is
this sort of the appeal of the health and wealth preacher?
Yeah, but my point is that's always been an aspect.
Right.
Which is why Christianity in the early days took off so well in the lower enslaved classes. Mm-hmm. It still does. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of people in the first century were genuine. And had less base reasons, but there was certainly a sizable portion for whom that was the appeal.
Sure.
You know, and don't think you don't do the same, listener. Everybody does this to an extent. I mean, just what portion of people's prayers are just like, can you give me some stuff? That's a pretty big bit, I'd imagine.
Maybe.
I mean, if you took all the prayers of the world of people, what portion of them are asking for stuff?
Like fun stuff?
Well, or just like any stuff, like, you know, just health or like material blessings or whatever.
Right.
So it's a big portion. I mean, it's all just I got to wave the sticks and hopefully the plane comes down from the sky.
And I don't think it's wrong to pray for things that you need, but
right.
we need to acknowledge the fact that there's a category of prayer that is just give me thing to make feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Give me thing to make feel better. Which is why we wear 2 masks and why, because if we just do the thing, then we have the government will give the thing to make feel better. And I have colored sticks.
Yeah.
And John Frum is there, and he's gonna, if we pray to the CDC.
Yeah.
It's all just it's really the same mentality. So thank you, listener Fabricator General, for that question. Do you think Fabricator General is a big man or a rubbish man? Or a big woman or rubbish woman? I'm not sure.
I think he's a big man.
Diggs a big man.
Yep.
Yeah. I probably I agree. So, yeah, I was a little late this morning.
Well, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I was I had some trouble this week. I was over in the Middle East, and I was I don't want to. I was driving a boat.
I see. Yeah.
And I wasn't paying attention, and I got a little crookedy.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I stopped global trade.
I was wondering if you had any involvement in this.
Yeah, it was a problem. It was an accident. I apologize for causing $9.1 billion a day in losses. For stopping the flow of all naval traffic around the globe. But it was an accident. And so no one can really be mad at me. How great was that, though? Plugging up the Suez Canal.
He drew a wiener in the ocean with his path, and then blocked the Suez Canal.
Well, I mean, there's some questions here. One, there's some. We haven't heard the name of the driver of the ship yet, the captain, which is how you probably know it's a woman. Right. I mean, it's probably a woman, which is why because it's like the same principle of like, if there's a mass shooting and the name doesn't come out immediately or pictures, then it's not a white person.
Just as an aside, did you see Kurt Eichenwald talking about how the Colorado shooter was probably anti-masker violence? Did you see that take? That was of all the hot takes over the Colorado shooting, I think Kurt Eichenwald wins for the hottest of hot takes, saying that it was somebody shot up the place because of masking requirements.
No, I did not see that, but I haven't also followed Kurt Eichenwald since his tentacle porn disaster.
Yeah, well, I'm just waiting around for the next disaster.
Yeah,
you know?
Well,
you got to be there. You got to be there when it happens.
Yeah. So I do enjoy. There's a timeline of his bio on Twitter where every year he's just dropping one of the places he works for.
Yeah.
It's like New York Times journalist and that's gone, and it's like WAPO journalist and that's gone, and now it's just tentacle porn aficionado.
Yep.
I mean, he'll never live that down.
No.
But yeah, if a shooter is not immediately identified, that means he is probably a non-white person. Mm-hmm. And if the person that wrecks a massive public transportation vehicle is not identified, it means it's probably a woman.
Yeah. So
they probably had. I mean, it could be a man, and they're not telling us for other reasons. I'm gonna put money on it being a lady. And then she just... But see, the only thing that makes me suspect that is not true is that women don't typically just draw big penises in the sea.
Indeed. But there's there's a good rubric you just brought up there in interpreting media information and lack thereof, in that if a crucial detail, which is probably known by someone, is not released in the reporting, it's because it had no useful spin. And
correct.
there was no way to make it serve the narrative they wanted, so they left it out.
Right. I mean, of course, people know who the driver of this boat was.
Yes.
Right. That is, the boat left with a driver, and that person should still be in charge of the boat. Right. So, or I guess a crew of drivers, because big boats require more than one person.
It's probably not even that hard to discover.
Right. No, you could figure it out if you were, but they just or they did, and they said, this makes someone look bad.
Yep.
Like maybe it's a Muslim transgender woman. And she just just right into the shore there. And made some Egyptian man with his singular backhoe try and dig it out. Which is the plan. That's the plan of the global trade, is to have one farmer with a backhoe figure this out.
Well, I think the Navy's on the way with a dredger.
Wouldn't it be great if someone plugged up the Panama Canal at the same time? Like, whoopsie.
Yeah. I mean, there's already. I'm dealing with it in my job. Shortages of all sorts of stuff. It's hard to get any like packaging, materials, chemicals. It's very difficult to get things right now. All sorts of things.
See,
then you block the Suez Canal. This is not. I'm not gonna have a fun day on Monday. I just tell you that.
See, you operate in a world that still is connected to like things.
Yeah.
Whereas my job is completely ethereal at this point. And I never noticed shortages.
Really nice.
I never noticed shortages or anything because I like all I am asked to do and paid to do is like walk into places and put my hands behind my back and walk around and nod or shake my head.
Yeah.
I go, this is a good idea. Don't do. And that's just, and people are like, oh, okay. And then none of it means anything. I'm just there for like.
Well, just to put it into perspective for you, before the Suez Canal thing, it was taking me, 6 weeks to get a box of bottles. Just regular, like, plastic bottles. No big deal. Yeah. Probably 25 billion of them in the world at any one time. So, wow. Globalism and global trade are not going to have a good year, by the look of it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I always need those.
Good. Yeah,
I need those reports from people in the field because I don't even require like office things.
Yeah,
like pens or paper. I have no physical requirements, and so I've already ascended to nirvana or something.
Do you just wrap yourself in a bed sheet and then walk around doing physics? Is that your job?
I do. I just walk around like
Yeah,
and people. I haven't tried wearing robes yet, but maybe I will.
You should.
I should. I don't think anyone would care. So there was the cargo ship. One other aspect of the cargo ship is, of course, we have to look at the conspiracy angle.
Mm-hmm.
Was this a conspiracy? In that currently the Russians have deployed most of their navy in the Mediterranean, and the U.S. has deployed theirs in the Gulf of Oman and the Red Sea.
Interesting.
And this thing conveniently cut the two off from each other. So did someone pay someone to do this on purpose? Perhaps, maybe all those ships lined up in the thing stuck now are easy to search. Maybe someone, U.S. or Russia, is worried about the other side maybe importing a bunch of military weapons to the Middle East to some other person that's their ally.
Interesting.
I don't know. Could be. I think it's just a woman driver.
Yeah.
But it could be something more.
It could.
And the other thing was the debris falling over Oregon. You sent me this.
Yeah. Do you have a take on this? I just saw the incredible slow motion shower of sparklies flying through the air.
Yeah, so if our listeners weren't aware, just look it up. There's a big, it was a very spectacular like fireball falling over the Oregon sky in the middle of the night. And it was like several little people. You know what it looked like? It looked like them in the movie Transformers when the Autobots were raining down from the sky.
Yeah.
It looked just like that. And people were like, what is this thing? And the people that are videotaping are going, what is it? What is it? No one. And first of all, the video and the comments show that no one really knows what shooting stars or comets look like anymore.
Right.
Because people are like, it's just a meteor in the comments. It's a meteor. Why are you guys freaking out? Well, first of all, meteors go very fast.
Yeah.
Like quite fast.
This thing, took like 30 seconds to cross from...
It took like 30, 40 seconds to cross the sky. Yeah. And you don't have time to pull out your phone to start recording a meteor. By the time you see it, it's gone. It's a flash, right? Because rocks in space, relative to Earth, are moving very, very quickly.
Indeed.
And comets, other people are like, it's just a comet.
Not that either, no.
Well, with the naked eye, a comet looks like a smudge in the sky.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Like Hale-Bopp or Halley's just looks like a little smudge moving across the sky because they're at much greater distances. They're very far away compared to meteors.
And its tail doesn't follow it, like
right
in an aerodynamic sense.
Correct. And so it's like when Halley's Comet came through in the 80s, everyone was like, oh yeah, look up there, there's the smudge. See the smudge? Mm-hmm. And that's all that's like, people are again fooled by fake space. Which is where people in media and in science, they take pictures with very advanced telescopes and of like these celestial bodies like Halley's Comet. Yep. And they put them through a bazillion image processing filters, and they add color because there's really not color in the original ones. And then they put it out and people are like, oh, that's what a comet looks like. And that's not what a comet looks like at all to your eyes, or even through a telescope in most cases. Like, you remember that famous photo of the Pillars of Creation?
No.
Are you familiar with?
No.
Oh, it's just like a picture of a nebula, but it looks...
Okay.
It's called the Pillars of Creation, and it was taken by the Hubble telescope, and it's a very nice photo. It's like these big giant plumes of gas, out in space.
Yep.
Light years away. And people are like, so, but all of it has been colorized because it doesn't actually, like, they've taken a heat map and they've added a color thing onto it, which isn't, it's not wrong, but it's sort of dishonest because people think that's what it looks like out in space. Right. And it would not look like that. Right. And so people are uneducated and ill-informed about what space is like. And so they see this thing going slowly across the sky that's very close, and they're like, oh, it's a meteor. And it's not, it can't be either of them. Right? And the official story, which I believe in this case, I think is the most likely, is that this thing was part of the Falcon 9 rocket that brought up the Starlink satellites on March 4th that failed to go out properly and has fallen back into orbit and is burning up as it comes back down.
Okay.
That they think it's like the stage 2 is coming apart. I think that's the most likely. It looks like debris coming down like it's spectacular, but it's sort of breaking apart as it comes down, right? Yeah. In the video. So I think the official story in this case is correct, probably. It's just SpaceX debris. But I will note that SpaceX is now becoming the de facto default explanation for anything seen in the sky. It's like if there's any light, they're like, it's SpaceX.
Yeah. Aren't there several other companies putting stuff up there right now, including the United States Air Force?
Yeah, and everyone, yeah. So it's like, first it was weather balloons, and then it was military aircraft. Then for a while it was Chinese lanterns, which didn't make any sense because no one does Chinese lanterns. And then recently it's been drones. Everything's a drone. Oh, what'd you see? It was a drone. And now everything's SpaceX. And we just have the flavor of the month of whatever we decide is the new explanation for unidentified aerial phenomena.
So if the Chinese army were to arrive on the West Coast via giant dirigibles, we could just say, oh, that's just SpaceX, don't worry about it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we had this. That's the news. That's the news. Did you want to talk about something before we talk about Zomia?
Nah, man. Let's do whatever Zomia is.
Okay. All right. This is when we need to have that guy.
All right.
So today we're going to talk about The Art of Being Ungoverned, which is a book by John Scott, a gentleman named John Scott. And he noticed in his research, he's an academic, he and some colleagues noticed that there is an area of the world in Southeast Asia, roughly Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, parts of China, that though on paper is inside all of these countries, in practice is largely an autonomous region.
Okay.
And they coined the term Zomia for this land. So they could, just have a little name to refer to it. And they say in the start of the book, Zomia is a new name for virtually all the lands at altitudes above roughly 300 meters, all the way from the central highlands of Vietnam to northeast India and traversing the 5 Southeast Asian nations and 4 provinces of China. So it's this hill country people, right? And the idea of this book, The Art of Being Ungoverned, is that so-called barbarians, or people that are outside the mainstream nation state or the state, are not like the story. Because history is written by states and empires, right? And in the imperial state version of history, barbarians are people that have not yet successfully been integrated into the state. They need to be. It will benefit them when they are, but so far they are not. And his argument is that we should not see it that way, and that the people of Zomia, at least, exist how they do, and have a lot of their primitive ways, he argues, quote unquote primitive, precisely as adaptations, chosen adaptations to prevent them from being as governable as other people. So his argument is that these people have retreated to the mountains and adopted lifestyles which makes government control over their lives very difficult, and they've done that on purpose.
Awesome.
And he sees the same. He sees similar behavior otherwise in the world. He notes, like the hillbillies of America.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's the same idea. Also, the people that live in like the swamps.
Would the Amish fall into this?
The Amish would fall into that too, in a way. Yeah. So Zomia is about 2.5 million square kilometers, and it contains about 100 million minority people. So not a small region, 100 million. Mm-hmm. And they are of what would you say, like a bewildering variety of ethnicities and languages. Like if you go up there, there's still like tons of small little regional languages that are used.
Yep.
And one of his arguments throughout the book is that doing so, like one of his arguments is that being ethnically and linguistically fluid makes you very difficult to control. Mm-hmm. And also that maybe being illiterate. Because one of his arguments is that the state largely is basically lists. Like that's how control is managed. Like you have people are on actuary tables, and this tells you where they live, who they are, and how much they can be taxed. And that the state is basically taxation. Like if you're outside the ability of the government to tax you, you're basically outside the system.
Right.
And so what do you do if you are... It's very difficult for you to be placed on a list. Because he highlights like the British colonialists coming through the area of Zomia. And they were trying to divvy up the place and figure out like, okay, which place is which, who lives where, who owes what taxes when, right? And they would go through and try and label all these people. And all of their categories of trying to label them would be insufficient. Like they would go through and they'd be like, okay, we'll do it by language. That'll be easy. If you if you speak this language, we'll call you part of this language group. And that'll be your quote unquote race. And then we'll have this certain relations with these peoples and figure out how to tax their society. And when they started actually trying to do it in practice, they found that though the parents may speak 2 or 3 languages, the children of those people would also speak 2 or 3 languages, but it would be a different 2 or 3. And the parents and the kids would share only one in common.
Interesting. Okay.
And because they would be constantly moving around, and the people would identify themselves as one ethnicity, but then the neighboring peoples would be like, oh no, that's not the Kawazars or whatever. The Kawazars are over there. Right? But they claim they're Kawazars. Like, yeah, but they always do that. They're being silly. That was, I mean, that was really the problem they kept running into.
Yeah.
And then they would try like things like a defining feature, like, okay, we'll do skin tone, will be this. But then there was so much intermarriage between them that didn't work long term either. And also that their laws they would try to pass out to the people could not be read by the people.
Right. Yeah.
Because they had abandoned. And so like they were like, well, not only can we not put them on the list, but they can't even read the list that we give them. Did
the Zomians use the currencies of their host nations?
Yes, but they would also use all of the currencies. It would be like if you lived in Texas and you were routinely trading in US dollars, but also Mexican pesos and also like Brazilian dollars. And you were just completely fluid between those currencies.
Any bartering involved in that too?
Bartering, and they also would sometimes make up their own currencies.
Oh.
And so keeping a record of like your income was nearly impossible.
I like
because
it.
It's a very similar situation to what's developing now, where everyone has their income in like 1,000 cryptocurrencies, and no one knows who's trading. It's like, well, how do you do accounting for this? And they didn't know, and so taxing them was very difficult, bordering on impossible. And so the story of the state is that these people are illiterate barbarians, and we look down on them. But James Scott is arguing that they abandoned formal writing precisely as an adaptation to get away from the control of the state, which is a big claim.
Yeah.
But it does serve that purpose. And maybe they didn't do it intentionally. Maybe they were just trying to they were a group of people that were trying to get away from the state, and just it happened through a sort of evolutionary process that those that didn't bother to learn language were more successful at doing that. And so it probably like sort of a cultural evolution thing.
Well, if right. Writing things down got you in trouble from this weird government claiming control of your land, I mean, you would do it, like you would stop using written language, and a couple generations hence, nobody's going to know how to write.
Exactly. I mean, it's
just the result. Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's sort of like what we're doing now, where people increasingly worried about government surveillance are just refusing to text or email stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't want to put my opinions in writing. Mm-hmm. Right? We'll talk on the phone. You become an oral culture. Or you listen to a podcast, which is also an oral culture. Mm-hmm. Because the writing it down provides a record. And government is basically record keeping. And if you don't have a record, right? I mean, that's what they say. That's like in school, if you get in trouble, it goes on your permanent record. And
right.
And in the government, if you get in trouble, it goes on your criminal record. But if you just can't be put on a record, it's very difficult. Like if you don't have like these people, it was even hard to get these people in trouble because like you would arrest them like, well, what's your name? And he'd have 7. And then he has no government ID of any kind. He's never been he doesn't have licenses. Right? And so then it's like, well, I don't know. Put him down as John Doe, or the Chinese equivalent of John Doe. Right? Mm-hmm. So it makes it hard. Now John Scott thinks that Zomia's days are numbered because he believes that the power of the state to put people on lists is growing. But he wrote this before a lot of he wrote this in the early O's, or the late O's, the 00s.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the developments, especially in cryptography, not just cryptocurrencies, but also cryptographic messaging, maybe throw a wrinkle in his idea that they're numbered. Because I think maybe they're not. And I think there may be a reason why so many people in Asia have taken up to the crypto space so readily, precisely for these reasons. So, so he believes, like I said, technological advances will make living outside the state more and more impossible. But my position is this so? Like, because we have like what you and I have is Urbit now. Mm-hmm. We have a second internet. which is untraceable and no one can knock it off, and they can't read your messages. It's even anonymous. So we have Bitcoin, we have Monero, which is a completely untraceable. I mean, the CEO of Earth, number 15, was talking to me the other day, and he had the same opinion. And I said, no, they're not going to be able to do it. He's like, they'll outlaw cryptocurrency. He's like, they won't be able to succeed. I was like, if China can't do it, the U.S. is not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
China's trying, but they don't succeed. Even if they crack down as hard as you possibly could, everyone would just use Monero, which is completely anonymous in every way. There's not even a public ledger. So I think that Scott may be incorrect that their days are numbered, but we will see. And he also points out that not very long ago, self-governing people not living in a state were the majority of mankind. Like now that seems like some sort of anarchist dream.
Mm-hmm.
But not very long ago, most people did not live in states. They lived in tribal communities. They were not incorporated in some larger state thing.
Yeah, most of human history is pre-Westphalia.
Yeah. And today it seems so alien because the state is so big and all-encompassing.
Yeah.
You're like, what do you mean? Like America, the U.S. government claims that it owns and has jurisdiction over everything from the Atlantic to the Pacific over these latitude lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but in actuality, how much of that space is it actually controlling?
Right.
Like I had this I was in my continued efforts to become, because one of the things, he's talked about being ethnically fluid, and I think our MAPS listeners are ethnically fluid also. Are we forming a new ethnicity here?
We should.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know what we'll call ourselves. Maybe we're the sky people.
Mm.
And we wear feathers like the Native Americans.
Yeah, man.
But I had this, because I was, in my efforts to become sky people, I've recently started flying airplanes, which is a lot of fun, but also somewhat scary. Because if you never have tried to take off a little plane, you have to go. It looks like you're going a lot faster from the driver's seat than it does from the passenger seat.
I bet.
Is all I'll say.
Yeah.
Like if you're riding in a plane and you're in the back seat, it's like, yeah, but if you're like the one in the front, it's like being in the front of the roller coaster. It's like, oh, this is quite fast. But anyway, you go up in the air, and the first thing you notice is that most of the America is a vast wilderness.
Yep.
Where no one lives, and that people assume that we are this highly controlled metropolis because they all live in clusters. But most of it is completely ungoverned. Because to be governed means basically that they can project force to that area. And there's almost all of it is not a place you could send a policeman to.
And the ability to project force has been declining for some time.
Correct. And is declining ever more rapidly. And the illusion is that it's more, but that's only because they project strong shows of force in like one area.
Yep.
Like they have currently Washington, D.C. locked down, right?
Right.
With the military. But that just means that there's less military to go around other places. I mean, just do a simple calculation of the number of people in the Army divided by the number of square miles of the United States.
Yeah,
and there's no possible way you can actually project force over the whole thing. You have to choose your targets, right? And so there's people just doing but then you notice there's people living like way out in the boonies, and they have done, they're doing insane things. Like the guy that was teaching me flying, he was pointing out all these little airstrips around the countryside. He's like, oh yeah, people have all their little private planes and they fly all over the place. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, look over there on that island. See that island in the river? There's an airstrip right there. Some guy built. He has his own private island. Over there's one, and then over there. And I didn't realize this because I don't know anything about flying, right? And in my head, again, because I'm still in the American mindset of the government controls everything, this sounded strange. But he was like, you don't have to, if you have your own plane and runway and stuff, you don't have to like tell anybody that you're going into the air. Which I think shocks a lot of people. You just get, just like you get in your car. You just get in and you go, and no one can do anything about it. He's like, there's no person you have to notify to get into the air or to land, right? Or to fly. He's like, basically, he had this map, and he's like, there's these areas around big airports and military bases that they're worried about, and the rest of it is open sky. He's like, so as long as you don't, he's like, basically, you can just be in the sky.
Yeah.
Over any part of America. And he said, he looked at me, he goes, you can actually do it going across borders too. No one really knows or cares. Like, he's like, I've flown over Mexico. I've flown into Canada, landed in Canada without passports. And it's like, no, first of all, no one knows because this is a tiny plane that doesn't show up on radar. Mm-hmm. And two, no one cares. Because what the government's interested in is these centers of where they, like the airport terminal, right?
Yep.
Like if you go, but look, there's nothing stopping you, listeners, from being a Mexican immigrant crossing the border the other way, right? Like this got me thinking. This is book on Zombie is like, well, is a wall such a good idea? Do you really want to not be able to escape to Mexico? Right? Maybe you want to be able to escape to Mexico rather than to a place that's a little more free in the future. Yeah. The Berlin Wall was built to keep the communists, the people on the east side in.
Yeah.
Not to keep the west side out. So maybe it's not, maybe you just, but you can, if you, I mean, I know people that have walked across the border to Canada unknowingly just hiking.
Yeah.
There's sort of nobody home when you get outside of the main structures of society. No one's governing it. It's just, so I think that we should all in maps, we should all have planes and all have runways on our homesteads and just create a pan-continental network of homesteading sky pirates.
Down with this.
And we just go fly back and forth. I mean, why can't Creative Accidents have a farm somewhere out wherever he lives, and Duke of and then we all have grass runways because that's all you need. And you just, if you have a half mile of flat land covered in grass, you can land a plane on it, and you can take off from there. And then we could be at each other's place in like 3 hours. Because these things go frighteningly fast. I was looking at the speedometer. I was like, "Wow, I'm going 400 miles an hour."
I've just got
I
this
don't feel
beautiful.
comfortable with that.
There's a beautiful vision of a maps meetup by appointment and airplane only, and we all get together.
Wouldn't that be? I had that same vision of us all one after another landing in the middle of a field somewhere in like the.
We can smoke some,
Wouldn't that be great?
Some butts, man. It'll be great.
Yeah, in the middle of Idaho or something. And you could do that. Like people are like, oh, they're going to require something for travel, like vaccines for travel. First of all, they're not, because travel is international, and there's going to be a lot of places around the world that just do not have mass vaccinations, like Africa, for instance.
Yeah.
And they're still going to want to fly to America, and it's just not going to work.
Well, that's just I've canceled plans to go to Canada this year because they're saying that Americans will be required to show proof of vaccination to get into Canada. So maybe your flight instructor can sneak me in.
Right, and so you just so first of all, that's what people are saying, and then you say, okay, but also, what if you just flew your own plane?
Indeed.
Right? I mean, does it go, if you get like a Cessna or something, is it going to go as fast as a 747? No. But it still goes pretty fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, especially because you're going in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And it cuts down the amount of travel time tremendously. And you can get all around the country in this, and all around all the countries with these sorts of things. You can even do. I don't know if you've ever had a boat on the ocean, but in the same way, there's no one really, in most cases, stopping you from sailing to another country.
Yeah. Yep.
Like you just, it's just water, and you just are like, oh, now I'm in a different place, and nothing. And then you get out, and then you're just walking around like, oh yeah, I'm here now. And this imaginary border didn't bother me. And so that's the sort of mindset you have to start adopting. Now, I made a tweet earlier. I was like, the case for radical optimism. Because people think it's going to become totalitarian, and they're going to try as they die. As the state is backed into a corner, it will bite harder. But they are losing. Don't worry too much. I mean, like, there's so many things going our way that it's almost like people worry about the Second Amendment at the same time that, like, there's whole companies devoted to ghost guns now.
Yeah, man.
Like distributed, unregistered guns that are everywhere. You can literally print a gun in your house.
Just about.
Yeah, I mean, you can just print gun, and then the cryptocurrencies are taking off everywhere. We have our own platforms. Cities are dying. I mean, things are actually going our way in a number of cases. The left is eating itself, which we all knew that it would, and they're spiraling out of control. So really, I don't think there's long-term much need to blackpill at all. But that said, if you want to avoid things in the time, again, just it's the same thing. Like if you want to, no one will stop you if you get in a hot air balloon and just fly somewhere. There are no police in the sky. Just like there's no police underwater or on the sea, really. I mean, if you're continually running cocaine between here and Mexico, yeah, the Coast Guard might pick up on you. But other than that, a lot of this just doesn't happen. And so, like in Zomia, that what the Chinese call the people living in the hills? They call them our living ancestors.
That's interesting.
Because they in their heads they are what the Chinese were like before they discovered like wet rice cultivation, Buddhism, civilization, right? But he says, John Scott argues that no, he thinks of them as more of like a transnational Appalachia, and that these places, these hill peoples, have the same things in common.
Yeah.
So, right. So virtually everything about these people's livelihoods, this is another quote, social organizations, ideologies, and their largely oral cultures can be read as strategic positionings designed to keep the state's arm at length, including their place of living, like their physical dispersion in rugged terrain, their mobility, their cropping practices, their kinship structure, pliable ethnic identities, their devotion to prophetic millenarian leaders. Now, see if that doesn't sound familiar with people in the hillbillies of America.
Yeah, man, a lot of this is ringing real true for Appalachia.
Yeah, like they're like when you people, a constant source of complaint with mainline Protestants and Catholics is that evangelicals and the largely the forms of Christianity that have taken up in what we would call the hillbilly country in America are a bit wild sometimes.
Yeah,
and they often have this sort of idea of, well, they're very often centered on the rapture and like the end times.
Yeah,
and very charismatic leaders, right? And which you might say are some form of prophet, like some charismatic religious leader comes along and is like, talking about rapture and heaven. But he points out the same exact thing happens in Zomia all the time, just under the guise of Buddhism. And his idea is that these people, this is an adaptation of people who are outside the state structures or are desiring to be. And they always focus on these strongmen leaders who come around and then make claims of like, my authority from God actually supersedes whatever the state is saying.
Right.
Right. And so then people, they glom onto that. Like he talks about the Baptists, the Southern Baptists having great success in these mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, in their conversion practices, and he goes, it's very fortunate that the Baptists came to some place that was very ready. It was always looking for a Messiah.
Yeah.
Because they were just always like, well, where's the next Messiah? Boom, here's Jesus. Okay, let's go. And they're just like, yeah, great. Give it to us, let's go. And then they took it, and then some of them used it how the Baptists thought they would. And some of them used it to say that the Chinese government was going to bring down the end times. And that they had to, I mean, just like they do here.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So, and this idea of pliable ethnic identities, like in some ways the right-wing move to embrace ethnic identity, like whiteness or Anglo-Saxon,
mm-hmm.
perhaps more of a move towards slavery than freedom. Because then you're making yourself, anything you can do to be put in a list or a category makes yourself more governable.
Interesting.
Right? Well, what if you were just like, well, I'm just, like, what if we were just sky people instead of white?
I'm going to start writing that on my census document.
Yeah, sky people. Sky person. I like that because we're both also a society built on plain culture and the free movement through the air, but also we are devoted. We're looking up to the heavens.
There you go.
See, so yeah, so just think twice about that. And there's other people that have this sort of same idea, like gypsies, polyglot tribes, the Cossacks, the people that were the refugees of the Spanish in the New World, marsh Arabs, sand bushmen. All these peoples have the same sort of social structures. And the argument is that that's not coincidental, but that is what people do when they're trying to outrun empires. And you find this same sort of pastoralism that focuses on these wild swings in religion, shifting cultivation. They're more focused. They don't really go to authorities ever. They have their own authorities, and they will settle disputes. And you sort of see this in America too, like the idea that your handshake was your bond. Like you would not go get a contract and involve the law.
And if somebody welched on your deal, you wouldn't necessarily sue them, but the society itself would punish them with lack of trust going forward.
With lack of trust, or you would go punish them yourself with a gun.
Yeah, that too.
Which is how people... But when you think about it, how is that different than what the government does if you renege on a contract and refuse to show up to court?
Yeah.
They still are using the force of the gun to enforce that, but why is it... So how, in some ways, how is it any different than if a person does that just on their own? And so the Yankee culture has always been, which is the overriding culture of America, New England-y, waspy thing, has always been recourse to institutional structures.
Yeah.
Whereas in other parts of America, the idea has been you should not involve the state as much as possible. And this is one area where I admire black culture, because they're like snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
This is between us. Why are you involving the cops? They see that as dishonorable, and in some ways it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, why don't you just come talk to me? Why don't we work this out? And if working it out involves a shootout, then that's just what it involves.
There's no, the knee-jerk reaction to that is like, oh, that's just vigilantism and revenge culture and all this blood feuds and all this stuff. And it's like, well, it can be that.
But
it can also be the way a society handles their own business.
Right.
And take some ownership of maintaining their social order rather than farming it out to some bureaucrat who doesn't live anywhere near them, who doesn't share their culture or their beliefs, who doesn't care if their neighborhood, if their town is flourishing or dying. Why would you give somebody that doesn't give a care about your well-being and your family and your posterity and future generations? Why would you wrap them into it when they don't have a dog in the fight? They're just in it for a sweet pension, courtesy of you.
Correct. Yeah, and this is why Back to Blue is probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that you shouldn't be just because
there's a difference between me backing Andy Griffith, who grew up in my town, and I know his parents, and he's the deputy, and I'm going to help him out where I can because I appreciate what he's doing to help keep our town safe and orderly. Then backing the blue in a mega city with a bunch of bureaucrats and government officials who are unionized and are just squabbling over tax revenue, and may or may not show up when I actually need them. Those are two very different things. And you can't equate them. Like the impulse to equate all police and we have to support all police. No, I don't have to support all police. Right. I don't have a stitch of sympathy or support for Atlanta or NYPD. I don't care what they do. I don't care how successful they are at it. The little local county deputies that I encounter on occasion, and while I don't really know them, it's a little more of a local relationship. There's a degree to which I care about what happens to them, how their job is going, how our local society interacts with them. Those are two very different things.
Correct.
And when you do this Back the Blue thing, it becomes, frankly, sort of a religion.
Yeah, it's the counter religion to the BLM religion.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you really want to, if you're a freedom-loving American and you say you want freedom, well, then why do you want police? The police are just there for the state to exert authority over you.
And collect revenue.
Right. And collect revenue. And as we've seen, if they are told to, they will stand down while a mob burns your place down.
Yeah. They did it lots of times in 2020.
They did it lots of times. They're not going to show up to protect. And then if you get mad about
the mayor and the city council. Yeah, the mayor and the city council control what the police do. And the mayor and the city council don't care about you, big city dweller. It should be evident to all of you that they don't care if your house gets burned down. They don't care if you get killed by a mob. They only care about political optics and, election returns and securing the favor of federal officials who can give them big grant money and some sweet kickbacks.
Right.
That's what's dictating the behavior of the police in your giant megacity.
Right.
We do have to see through this, people.
Yeah, so black people are correct in that you don't involve the police when you don't have to, which is most of the time.
Yeah.
Just don't why are they? And if you don't do that, then they start to go away because then they're not called as much. They don't need as many. The police they lose some funding. They hire less cops.
Right. But with that comes a responsibility. Like if that's the way you're going to play it, great. But then you need to build your own local structures and customs and culture that can govern your community. Like it just can't be. If you let it slip into the hands of just a different strongman, like the local, cartel or gang or whatever, you haven't done yourself any favors.
Correct. Think about it. Some of the really actual free people. This was a joke that Zizek used to make that someone told him, but it's true. Is that there was this is actually a true story. There was a Arab man who moved to America. And he said, they call this the land of the free. I can't even beat my wife here. What kind of freedom is this? Right. And he has sort of some of the most free people in the world right now are the herdsmen in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I mean, that truly, like, this is why the idea that they hate us for our freedoms was always dumb. I was like, they have way more freedom than you do.
Mm-hmm.
They can do anything. They can like get together and chop off people's heads and nothing happens. I mean, not that you should, but they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, think about like they resisted countless caliphates, the Russians, the USSR, the USA. They threw off all. They're like, no, we're not being. And they threw a lot of the same methods as the Zomians. Like they have an oral culture. They have thousands of little languages, thousands of little tribes. Classifying them is difficult. They have an adherence to wild prophets that in the name of Islam come along and like, we have to do this now. Mm-hmm. It's the same. It's that strategy appears to be the strategy that peoples adopt when they want to not be inside of a state. And it seems very effective. So, I mean, think of who also is very free is the pirates of Somalia.
Yeah.
I mean, they're way more freer than you are.
So how do you square the apparent freedom of these people with their also quite apparent very low quality of life?
Well, some of them do have low quality of life and some of them don't. Mm-hmm. Like I think the low quality of life of the Afghan herdsmen is somewhat overstated. The Somalians got started, a lot of people don't know this, but the Somali pirates got started because other countries were encroaching on their fishing land. Their fishing, not land, their fishing sea. Yeah. And they were depleting it of fish. And so eventually the Somali fishermen started like getting guns and getting on their boats and driving out there and chasing them away.
Yep.
And things just sort of escalated.
Right.
And and they were like, well, now you're going to give us the money back that you stole from them. And well, but see, it's the difference between like, I think you have to thread the needle here of becoming like barbarous, like truly like a violent people, but also like having a nanny state.
Yeah.
And people don't think that you can do that, but I think maybe you can. And maybe we're getting. I think it's been done before. I think arguably America used to be that, not so long ago. Like the Old West was. I mean, the Old West was not that violent. Occasionally, they would have like shootouts with Indians or something, but on the whole, it was not very violent at all. But also, there wasn't. So it is possible, and I think a lot of it is just technology has allowed more people to be put on lists. And actuary tables, but you can also just try your best to not be put on any sort of list. Which is the main.
The big problem here, the biggest obstacle for people in America that want to try to live in these ways, is that it has become very difficult in America to be able to control property without it being deeded like by the state and in some property register down at the county office or whatever, and therefore subject to taxation and therefore subject to confiscation. Like, how do you own property without it being anybody's business in America? That's that's like the number one question in my mind with this topic.
Well, yes. And he addresses that in the book. Well, to do that, you either need a sort of, some cultures have done it by having large familial tribes that just defend it with arms.
Yep.
And then B, they have adopted various cultivation practices which do not require them to be in the same place every year.
Interesting. Okay.
Like wet rice farming is something, and like our farming of fields is something where you prepare the fields, but they have more slash and burn cultivation that allows them to farm here this year, and then next year maybe we farm somewhere else. And so one of the things that these people have always had is a certain degree of nomadism, because I mean it is true to some degree that private property or like property ownership and the state go together, because like the Native American tribes who are nomads didn't really have a concept of like private property.
Well, there used to be a fair, like the government used to be fair about this. They would say, okay, this portion of our nation is currently uncontrolled, so you can homestead there. You can just go out there and have some land. And they still do this in Canada, by the way, up in the northern parts.
They still do it in some parts of America. Really?
Homesteading in America?
Yeah, there's still some states with homesteading laws.
Okay, more on that later. Yeah. But that's one solution to this, but it would require our government to say, okay, just because there's a bunch of land out there that nobody controls, it doesn't make it federal property.
Right.
But right now, in many states, like most of the state is considered federal property, which is ridiculous because think about all the people that could just go and homestead there and cultivate it and make it productive, and new cities and towns could grow. But right now, try to start a new town in this country. You cannot do it. Yeah, I've looked into this. You cannot do it. It's not feasible.
That was where the Bundys got in trouble. They got in their kerfuffle with the government.
Yeah,
because they were having their cows and they were letting them graze in the wild, and the government was like, "This is our land," and the Bundys were like, "No, it isn't.
Yeah,
this is just land. It's just land, and you don't get this."
Yeah.
And then
they
the
used
Bundys,
to be called the range. They were out on the range, and
look,
one day the government said, "Oh, we own the range."
Yeah. And then the Bundys, the government said, "No, you're going to give us that," and the Bundys said, "Well, come and take it."
Yeah.
And they had exactly what I was just describing. They had a big familial tribe, and they all got together with guns and pointed them at the FDA, the agents, and the government left.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, we're not going through that. And so if people are actually willing to defend it, and I'm not saying that that's the best strategy, but I am saying that it is a strategy that worked. Yeah. This podcast is not advocating violent revolution, because people are always like, rah, 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 rah. But no, I'm just saying that that's what they did, and that they disagreed that the government owned the rights of their cows to be there, right? And they were willing to go to arms over it, and that made a difference,
right? One way or another, the uninhabited portions of our country need to become governed or ungoverned like the open ocean is. I mean, yeah, there's like the law of the sea, but good luck, getting any of that enforced, except in extraordinarily large and high dollar circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, right? I think that in large portions of the country, we do need to defund the police.
Because defund everything. I mean, if there's just rocks and
defund the FBI,
lizards, there doesn't need to be government there.
Right. Yeah. Defund the FBI. Because it's like, is this the land of the free and the home of the brave, or isn't it? Can't you watch over yourself?
There's no freedom on federally controlled property, and it doesn't require any bravery to be there.
Correct. So I'll give you some examples before we close out of empires and states complaining about the hill people. All right, so this is a quote. "The isolation occasioned by methods of travel so slow and difficult is intensified by several circumstances. For one thing, the routes are roundabout. Travel is either down one branch along a creek and up another branch, or up a stream to a divide and down another stream, or a further divide. This being the case, married women living within 10 miles of their parents have passed a dozen years without going back to see them." That was from a mainline Protestant person speaking about the difficulties of engaging with the people in West Virginia.
Yeah. West Virginia.
It really was, like back in the day.
That's my people.
Yeah, because they were just so isolated.
Yeah.
And so there's two strategies. One is to be extremely isolated. The other is to be constantly mobile, which is why I have been a proponent of #van life and also #have your own plane, because just be. Imagine because a state doesn't exist unless you can lock people down to an area.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes a state. Like what does it mean to vote if no one lives in one space?
Yeah.
Like who gets to vote? Who gets to vote there? What does it mean to tax people if they don't? Like how do you tax the? This is another dirty secret of America: is that our gypsies, which are not Roma but just people that travel everywhere, seldom really pay any taxes.
Yeah.
Because they don't live anywhere.
Yep.
They don't like they're like here they live and then over there they live, and whether or not they're they really don't. So a degree of mobility, mobility and freedom are not, they may be synonymous in many cases. Not necessarily, but you need to be able to move, even if you're not moving. That makes sense?
Yeah, sure.
Like you need to be able to go, even if you're not. And so the one thing we have to ask in closing, like that Mitchell and Webb skit, where they're wearing the skull caps and they're like, he looks at him and goes, and they're the Nazis and they go, "Are we the baddies?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, our caps have skulls on them. Isn't that something the bad guys would do?" So just to consider, are those of us who are generally quote unquote pro-civilization, are we merely pro-state? And if not, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Right? Are you merely pro-state? And so in some ways, let us have sympathy for the anarchists who made the autonomous zone in Seattle. In some ways that was admirable. They're just like, you know what?
If they had done it out on the range, I would have been a lot more supportive.
Yeah, I agree, because they hurt a lot of people in the doing of it.
Yeah,
but
they wrecked a lot of small businesses and all that.
Right. So that's the negative portion. But we focused on that before. Let's focus on the positive portion, which is that they had a spirit of freedom and ungovernance, and that spirit should be encouraged. It just should be channeled in a more positive way. And so here we're healing the left and right divides right now. We're bringing everyone together. This is a podcast of healing and hope and change, and love and light.
Back in the day, libertarians used to talk about this kind of stuff instead of weed and sex.
I know. I think more and more I'm becoming sort of an anarchist, because it's just as you study conspiracy theories, you're like, wow, the government's horrible all the time. Yeah. Which is a biased view. It's not horrible all the time. I agree. It's just horrible a lot of the time. Tolkien became an anarchist later in life.
Really?
He wrote that in his letters. He said he was either favoring anarchy or like a very distant, low-key monarchy that didn't bother people. And it's not hard to see why, because he lived through the government feeding 2 generations of his people into machine guns fire for really no reason or benefit.
Yep.
It just impoverished the country and ruined all the good things that England had. So he was like, well, I'm not trusting anyone. It's not hard to see why Tolkien became so. So that's what I say when people get mad at me for being an anarchist. Like, well, look, it is trad because Tolkien was it, and he invented orcs. So what's more trad than him?
Excellent point.
Exactly. I mean, plus also, I mean, for some reason, a bit weird. A lot of right-wing people became monarchists, which is not, I understand. I get it. It's fine. Not hating on it. But let's keep in mind that God himself said it wasn't a good idea in the Bible. Because they were like, let's have a king, and God was like, don't do that. And like, no, really, we want to. And then God was like, he's just gonna use it to oppress you. And they're like, no, seriously, we want a king. God's like, fine, okay, whatever. So just I don't know. Let's maybe we have a society more modeled after the Book of Judges, where we're just sort of a tribal people, and then we have loose judges that are.
Doesn't the Book of Judges just descend into more violence and death and despair all the way from beginning to end?
No.
Yeah, it does.
It's
that was
okay.
a rhetorical question.
It's okay.
They cut up
Look,
a prostitute at the end of it or something.
The problem is none of us have long.
Land.
But look, that's what you got to do if you're gonna.
No,
I don't have the answers. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I don't have the answers for all the details. This is the thing. People are like, you propose a new system, and people are like, but what about all the death that would occur? And you go, I don't know. We'll solve that when we get to it. Like, I heard this great phrase the other day in Florida, of all places, which is where the real Florida men are also poets, because they sit there with their Jane tattooed on their collarbone and their fingernails and their brass knuckles. But I was outside, and there was this one guy who was a classic Florida man. He had a beer gut. He was very tanned / sunburned, walking around shirtless outside of the strip mall, because why not, in his flip-flops. And he was on the phone talking very loudly, and he goes, yeah, well, we'll burn that bridge when we have to cross it. And then he hung up. I was like, that was poetry. We'll burn that bridge when we have to cross it. That is Florida man. And look, I don't have an answer to these systems, to these questions, but we'll burn that bridge when we have to cross it. You understand?
Okay.
I don't have the answers yet. This is not a podcast advocating any kind of violence or anything, but you're saying, what about your system you're imposing may entail violence unnecessarily or as a consequence? And I say, we'll burn that bridge when we have to cross it. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, but we're going to be peaceful, loving people throughout.
We love you all, listeners.
Love. We're ascending to the fifth dimension.
In our Cessnas.
In the age of Aquarius. In the Cessnas, yeah. Everyone go buy a plane. I know that's a big ask.
We haven't even funded the billboard yet. Now we're on to planes.
Oh, I know. Quick while the exit's going. More people donated. Thank you, James. Roebuck, James B. Roebuck III. Thank you, James. Thank you, Michael Capo Keys. Creative Accidents again. Love creative.
Thanks, bro.
I think I already thanks Bannister. Everyone,
Bannister. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Everyone, thank you. We got to fund the billboard, and after we fund the billboard, we'll work on getting everyone planes. Go get Hey, wait. Pause the exit. Is the exit paused?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I was talking with someone about this. Do you realize how not a lot of... It only takes 40 hours of flying to get a license. You can knock it out in a week. Which seems... Does that seem like too little time to be flying a plane over people's houses? Yes. But that's what it is. And if you only fly for 12 more hours, you can get certified to land on the water. Which we definitely need to do.
Yeah.
And so in 52 hours, you can go from never having flown ever to across the Alaskan bush or on a river somewhere. And so everyone needs to go do this. Just go get your licenses. That's what I'm asking you. And then we'll work on the planes later.
When you get your license...
Sky people forever, hoo-ah, hoo-ah, or whatever our chant is that we say.
Okay.
Yeah. We got to come up with a tribal chant.
Can you come pick me up and we'll go on a maple syrup run?
Yes.
Get that good stuff.
I do need to take a trip to the Adirondacks. The Adirondacks are calling me.